Welcome to the Unwashed Asses, episode 60, recorded for Wednesday, November 28th, 2018. Oh, we finally made it to Wednesday. It's weird getting 2 episodes in a week like this, but I like it. I don't feel the pressure of having to do a big hour-long spectacle. Instead, I get to do a nice, easy, light topic, something that I can just ramble about. That's movies. Particularly 2 that I've seen recently were Fantastic Beasts 2, the Crimes of Grindelwald, and then on Netflix they had the Ballad of, I'm going to say it wrong because I always remember it wrong here, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, the Coen brothers venture that released simultaneously in select theaters and on Netflix. I guess we'll just start with the better of the 2, which was definitely the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. I had mixed feelings going into this one because while I am a tremendous fan of the work that the Coen brothers do, particularly The Big Lebowski is one of my all-time favorite movies. Like, if I'm in a bad mood, that's getting thrown in, and I'm feeling pretty good afterwards. But things like No Country for Old Men, Fargo, let's see what else they've done here. This is just riveting material as you listen to me scroll through here. Okay, so yeah, Oh Brother, Where Art Thou? The Man Who Wasn't There. Burn After Reading, I dug that quite a bit. The True Grit remake didn't really hit with me, but it was at that point where I could realize a movie is good, even though I don't particularly care for it. What else? Unbroken, Bridge of Spies, Hail Caesar. So not a lot that I've seen, but the ones that I have seen, I dig it. I'm not seeing here though The Big Lebowski, and I'm going to be super upset with myself if I fucked that up. Fargo. Okay, yeah, Big Lebowski. All right, we're good. I'm back on track here. So, yeah, this one was, while it was a Coen Brothers venture, it was a Western, and I'm not particularly big on the Westerns, especially with all the hype that's been going around on, what the fuck is it? Red Dead Redemption 2. I don't really care for it. The most I got into Westerns was, what was it? Lonesome Dove, and then what was it? Louis L'Amour novels. My grandpa was really big into Louis L'Amour, and so I had picked up a couple of his collections of short stories, and none of them really, in hindsight, stand out. They're still enjoyable reads, something that passes the time. So when I see that a Western is going to be the next hot thing, I kind of shy away from it. But it was a late night. We wanted something to watch, and rather than watch reruns of The Office or something else that we really you just put on for noise, you do the thing of where you're going through Netflix and you want to watch something, but you don't know what you want to watch, and you don't want to risk watching something you haven't seen, but at the same time, you don't want to watch something you've seen a billion times, but inevitably, after 15 minutes of scrolling, you settle on something you've always watched. But not so with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs. So, put this one on a whim. Figure, we'll try it. If it ends up being not so great, like the John Leguizamo special, then we can just always turn it off. What followed, though, was several unexpected twists with it. First and foremost, I had, through my own ignorance and not doing any real research or looking into the film itself, not realized it is an anthology film. It's not one long coherent story. It's broken up into 6 individual stories, and there's really no tying any of them together. It's very much they stand alone on their own, and they're all equally wonderfully told and just true masterpieces in their own right. So that was part one. Part two is how wildly different each of the stories was going to be. The first one that we have with the actual ballad, the namesake, the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, is an exaggerated tale, like a tall tale almost, of the titular character, Buster Scruggs, as he sings and works his way through the Old West and kind of narrates his own adventures and what's going to happen. It's very, getting back into like Clockwork Orange, hyper violent. It set the tone for a movie that wasn't actually going to happen. And the reviews I've read on various sites seemed that people really got into this part of the film, and then in the subsequent stories fell off because it stands on its own in the way not only that what takes place in the story, but in the tone. It's very over the top, and the others are much more down to earth and realistic. So I don't want to break down like each individual one, because this is one of those rare movies where I feel that anything, spoiling or hinting, anything that's going to sway your judgment or set an opinion is going to detract from the experience, because even with the first story of the Ballad of Buster Scruggs, what really got me while watching it was the character, not necessarily development, but how well they're told and how the Coen brothers, through the writing, suck you into each of the tales and really make you care for the characters themselves. And that it's full of well-known actors like James Franco, Liam Neeson, and Tom Waits. Tom Waits was a huge surprise, but they all perform remarkably well, and sometimes in roles that you would not expect from them. It's a wild departure from their more notable roles, and I don't want to give anything away or say something that kind of tips you off into what might be going on with the individual stories, because more than once, it was a recurring theme with each story. I was like, oh, shit, no, don't let that happen. Please, no, not that. And it made me realize a theme that throughout most of the stories, it's because of your attachment to these characters, you're rooting for them, you're pulling for them, but you realize these, for the most part, aren't happy stories. They're not stories where the hero emerges unscathed and rides off into the sunset. They're very much grounded in reality and are just absolutely heartbreaking in some scenarios. Specifically one, it stuck with me the rest of the night and through the majority of the next day, where I was just absolutely distraught and devastated by what had occurred and couldn't get it out of my mind. And it's kind of like when you watch a scary movie and you don't want to go to bed right away after watching it, so you got to do a chaser of like a stand-up or a comedy or something that's going to put you in a better spirit and take your mind off of what you just saw. And that definitely occurred with one of these short stories. I can't get over how well they're told. And even though we did watch it on Netflix, it's one of those things where, since it is in theaters, I'm tempted to go, track it down and watch it on the big screen, just for one, to rewatch it, two, to get that movie theater experience, and three is just to experience those visuals on a much grander scale, because not only is the storytelling top notch, the typical Western music sets the tone right, and and sets a pace for each story exceptionally well, but the visuals are just stunning. And this comes from a person who really doesn't care for deserts and most Western landscape, but it's not all that typical Western landscape. You get the plains and wagon trains, plains of wagon trains, the rolling hills, and then you get the wooded mountains with the gently falling snow, and each you can see, you know, like how well they establish the mood by, all right, we're going to use this color scheme, and it's, I don't know, I can't rave enough about how good it was, how utterly thrilled with the Ballad of Buster Scruggs I was. So if you have Netflix, definitely go watch it. It's not super long. It was little over 2 hours, but it passes real quick. And part of that, I think, is because of how it's all broken down, and it's each individual story. So you're able to pay attention and you stay locked in with it instead of, you know, being drug out over 2 hours like the Crimes of Grindelwald. Movie 2 is substantially less good. It's not a good film. It's not an enjoyable experience. It's not even something that's fun. Now, Harry Potter is something that, while I enjoy the films, I never read the books, didn't really get into the extended lore. So when I saw that Fantastic Beasts was coming out, part of me was excited because it was a way for the story to continue outside of the Harry Potter focused center of it, where, you know, kind of like what Star Wars has right now, where, yeah, we're getting new movies, but a lot of them are focused on the Skywalkers, you know, where we had what was it, Rogue One taking place literally between episode 3 and 4. Solo being a precursor, which was good until we saw a Darth Maul lightsaber. I want them to tell different stories. I want them to get into uncharted areas and do things that don't rely on the Skywalkers and lightsabers. And Star Wars has just been failing spectacularly. So after, 8 films of Harry Potter, I was not necessarily keen on getting any more Harry Potter in my life, but Fantastic Beasts promised, okay, well, this is, you know, decades before Harry Potter was even born. We don't have any characters that are directly tied into those series of movies. It's a good clean break. We're going to do it in America. It's away from Europe, so they're distancing themselves quite a bit. And the first one, I liked it. I liked it quite a lot. It's definitely up there as far as the Harry Potter films are concerned. I don't know that it's the best, but it is certainly very good. And a lot of it was because of how fresh it was, and it was getting a different perspective on things and a whole lot of world building. So it did set itself up for a sequel. Well, said sequels finally rolled around, and I went into it with the expectation that, okay, they set up the story fairly well for a sequel with, you know, Johnny Depp's character of Grindelwald being outed and ready to go take over the world and do what he needs to do. But from there, it devolves into a very long, drawn-out film of, essentially, it's a movie of red herrings. It's characters chasing things that don't need to be chased, and the film trying to misdirect the audience with not really any success whatsoever. And the times where it was able to deceive and mislead, the payoff wasn't even really worth it. We have characters like Credence, who have miraculously come back from the dead and trying to fill a purpose of, we're not really sure, because there's several characters, namely Grindelwald, trying to manipulate him into doing their ulterior motives, whereas the Ministry of Magic wants him dead just to have him dead. Dumbledore wants him investigated, but doesn't really say why. He feels unnecessary. That feels like a character. And if we even get into the root of who the character is as an Obscurus, he's possessed by this entity that they say, oh, well, nobody's ever lived to be this long. The Obscurus usually kills them or whatever. Why is he not dead? Why is he in this movie? It's utterly pointless to have him here. He serves... I guess we'll just spoil it here, because, even if you are a huge Harry Potter fan, I don't advise seeing this one in theaters. Definitely wait for the rental. It's a rental at best. At best. I'd say you could just skip it entirely. Long and short of it, it is believed that Credence is one of the long-lost Dumbledore brothers, of which we didn't know there were any long-lost brothers, and Grindelwald wants to use him to kill Dumbledore. It's a dumb setup, an unneeded setup, and now people are flipping out and trying to figure out, well, how could this have happened? The timelines don't make sense. The Dumbledore parents were either dead or imprisoned. He couldn't have been born at this time. It doesn't, now they're going about, well, maybe it's a cousin, but Grindelwald distinctly said it was a brother, and he has a phoenix. It wasn't needed. They could have done a more focused story on Grindelwald trying to raise not necessarily an army, but make the wizarding world's presence known to the general populace, the world of Muggles. We don't need this superpowered weapon and essentially getting your Luke versus Darth Vader moment. It could have been a great political thriller, waging the Ministry of Magic against the Magical Congress of the United States. It reeks of possibility and potential that was squandered in favor of callbacks. And this movie is egregious in its blatant use of callbacks and unnecessary characters. Credence is just one of them. We also have Dumbledore, who, he does play in with the Grindelwald lore, but acting as a secret spy master for Newt, and mostly serving as a device to get the viewer back to Hogwarts in several unnecessary scenes. Most notably when we have Lita Lestrange reliving her past in a sequence that ultimately doesn't pay off because she eventually dies. And her entire plot revolved around one of the biggest red herrings of, well, who is Credence? For the most of the movie, they lead you to believe he is one of the Lestranges. Spoilers, he's not, and that thread really doesn't go anywhere, much like the character who instigated it. Who was he? Yusuf. So we have Credence, we have Dumbledore, Lita to a large extent, and probably the worst is Nagini. Now Nagini, for those paying attention, was the snake that, what's his no-nose face? Ralph Fiennes, Voldemort. It was one of his Horcruxes and constant companion throughout the bulk of the Harry Potter franchise. So again, we're getting a callback and a setup for Harry Potter that doesn't necessarily need to be there. We find out she's some type of creature that's cursed to lose her humanity. Eventually she'll turn into a snake forever. But she does nothing except play essentially the hapless girlfriend to Ezra Miller's Credence character. She doesn't actively turn into a snake aside from one circus trick, and does nothing except, kind of stand in the back and cover her face quite a lot. She serves no purpose in there. There's not even much of an emotional connection or bonding between her and Credence, because Credence has the emotional development of a brick. You can't resonate, you can't connect, you can't even sympathize for a character who has no emotional depth. And I don't know if it's Ezra Miller, because I've only seen him in this and Justice League, but I didn't really even care for him in The Flash, so I don't know. it might be him. It just might be bad writing that he's trying to work with, kind of like Hayden Christensen had as Anakin Skywalker. The character of Queenie takes unexpected detour in character where she's now you know what, I'm not even going to get into it. The bulk of it is just there is a lot of useless low consequence material being peddled for a movie that is over 2 hours long. It drags on and on. There's not much happening. The characters themselves aren't really likable. The visuals are overly dark and bland. It doesn't capture that same sense of fascination that we had in the first movie. And it sets things up for an unnecessary trilogy. I had expected that things would be wrapped up by the end of this movie, and 2 hours later, I'm like, why is this movie still going on? Oh shit, they're setting up a trilogy. So, I don't know. I mean, even Rachel, who's an uber diehard Harry Potter fan, I don't think she was too impressed with it. And again, I've not read the books, but I've enjoyed the films, and this just smacked of a lazy cash grab. So, again, beware with it. If you're going to go to the movies, just double check. See if Ballad of Buster Scruggs is playing, and go see that instead. All right, so we'll be back Friday, and don't know what we'll talk about then, but if you have any comments, questions, concerns, suggestions, criticisms, send an email over to theunwashedasses@gmail.com. Again, theunwashedasses@gmail.com. Otherwise, of course, you can support the show. $1 a month, that's all we ask. Head over to patreon.com/zeroand09, ZEROAND09. $1 a month keeps things going. If we hit that $100 a month mark, then we will expand it to get 5 shows a week instead of the 3. Of course, some other goodies in there, like digital prints and things like that. But if you can't contribute, it's cool. We understand. You can always just tell a friend. But that will do it. We will see you